Let's kick things off with a title that almost wasn't what it became. Xenogears was originally pitched as Final Fantasy VII, but Square took one look at its wild themes and went, maybe let's not. What we got instead was a standalone beast. A philosophical mech opera that plays like someone mashed up Evangelion, Chrono Trigger, and a psychology textbook in one CD. Now, yeah, the second disc turns into a glorified audiobook. There's no dodging that. But even with its rushed pacing and budget-cut storytelling, Xenogears still delivers one of the most ambitious RPG experiences ever crammed onto a PS1 disc. The turn-based combat throws in an AP combo system where you can chain light, medium, and heavy attacks to unlock special moves. It's snappy, strategic, and feels surprisingly modern. And then there's the gear battles. Climbing into giant mechs mid-dungeon and switching to a whole different set of mechanics was mind-blowing back then. Your fuel becomes your lifeline. Every move drains it, and if you run dry mid-fight, your giant robot turns into an overpriced paperweight. So you're constantly balancing risk, timing, and when to unleash that devastating death blow. The plot? Let's just say it involves reincarnation, government conspiracies, lost civilizations, alien gods, and enough biblical allegory to make your Sunday school teacher sweat. And hey, if you played it in Japanese as a kid using a walkthrough from a magazine like I did, then congrats. You unlocked hard mode before you even knew it existed. Look, Xenogears is a mess, but it's a beautiful, unforgettable mess. And even if it never gets the glow-up it deserves, this one still punches way above its weight nearly 3 decades later. Digimon World 3 is the weird little cousin of classic JRPGs. The one that shows up to the family reunion wearing goggles, talking about fire breath and digital monsters, and somehow steals the show anyway. It's clunky, it's grindy, and it takes a while to love. But once it clicks, you're in for one of the most addictive Digimon experiences from the PS1 era. You jack into a virtual MMO called Digimon Online, and surprise, get trapped inside when hackers attack. Now you've got to figure out how to log out while collecting Digimon, battling corrupted programs, and maybe saving the digital world along the way. It's half dot hack and half Pokemon fever dream, but somehow it works. But what sets Digimon World 3 apart is its hybrid combat and progression systems. Instead of catching dozens of Digimon like Pokemon, you start with a fixed party of 3 and grow them through multiple Digi-evolution trees. Each Digimon can unlock several forms, but those evolutions depend on reaching specific levels and winning enough battles. So yeah, you're grinding, but with purpose. Want that mega form? Better train smart and meet the right conditions to unlock it. The battles are turn-based with chunky animations and a clean interface, but what really keeps you hooked is the mid-combat Digivolution system. And once unlocked, you can use the DV command to evolve during fights, switching into stronger forms on the fly. Some fights even trigger Blast Digivolution, a temporary rage-fueled form that activates automatically in tough spots and dishes out serious damage. Sure, the overworld is confusing as hell, and yes, the random encounter rate is high enough to make a monk swear. But there's a weird charm to it all. The towns are quirky. The music slaps in that crunchy PS1 way, and the game nails that feeling of being stuck inside something much bigger than yourself. It's not for everyone. Digimon World 3 demands time, patience, and a high tolerance for backtracking. But if you're the kind of player who gets hooked on min-maxing stats and slowly unlocking every hidden form, this game will sink its claws in deep. It's clunky, yes, but it's got heart. And in the end, that's what makes it a cult classic. Now look, if you've ever rolled your eyes at turn-based combat or thought you were too cool for pixel art, Suikoden 2 is here to change your mind, and possibly your entire RPG belief system. This isn't just another 90s JRPG, this is a political drama, a war epic, and an emotional roller coaster disguised as a PlayStation 1 game. It throws you into a world torn apart by betrayal, ideology, and power struggles. And yeah, there's magic and giant squirrels too, because balance. But what really makes Suikoden 2 shine is its army of 108 recruitable characters. And these aren't just background NPCs. Many of them have full story arcs, unique abilities, or impact your castle's development, turning your HQ from a sad pile of bricks into a thriving mini-kingdom. Some characters change the outcome of major story beats, some die if you don't do things right, and some are just there to make you smile. And that's the beauty of it. The combat is equally clever. You've got your standard 6-person party turn-based battles, but then the game throws in large-scale tactical wars where decisions matter, and even one-on-one duels that play out like rock, paper, scissors with actual stakes. Each system feeds into the next, so everything feels connected. And don't get me started on the music. It hits emotional highs and melancholic lows like it's trying to win a Grammy. Even if you never touch the first game, which you absolutely should, Suikoden 2 still works as a standalone masterpiece. But play both, and you'll notice returning characters, expanded lore, and moments that hit 10 times harder. The remaster of Suikoden 2 is finally out, and it's everything fans hoped for. Visuals got a crisp upgrade without losing that classic charm. The UI's cleaner, loading times are way faster, and the soundtrack got lovingly remastered. It's the perfect way to experience one of the best RPGs ever made, whether you're revisiting or playing it for the first time. Final Fantasy Tactics isn't just a tactical RPG. It's the tactical RPG that made people who swore they hated grid-based combat suddenly reconsider their entire gaming identity. Released as a spin-off, it quietly slid into the PlayStation library and ended up becoming one of the most iconic games on the system. This wasn't just good for a side project, it was genre-defining. At its core, Final Fantasy Tactics is about positioning, planning, and punishing yourself for that one tiny misstep 5 turns ago. You build a team of soldiers, wizards, archers, and eventually, some completely broken secret characters, and dive into battles where every move counts. If your knight takes one step too far or faces the wrong direction when their turn ends, get ready to eat a critical hit to the back of the head. Yeah, this game doesn't mess around. But the job system is where Tactics really flexes. You don't just pick a class and stick to it. Instead, you're constantly unlocking new jobs by gaining experience in others, leading to this amazing web of progression where your characters can go from lowly squires to time-bending mages or dual-wielding samurai. Want a white mage that also knows how to throw ninja stars? It's not a good idea, but you can. All of this unfolds in Ivalice, a world so rich and politically messy, it feels like someone crammed an entire medieval drama like betrayals, war, and religious conspiracies into a strategy game. It's not easy to follow, but once you're in, it grabs you hard. Let's be real. If someone told you a turn-based RPG set in the Wild West would become a cult classic, you'd probably picture a cowboy riding a chocobo with a revolver made of pixels. But Wild Arms didn't just exist. It kicked open the saloon doors, dropped a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack on the jukebox, and said, "Yeah, I'm turn-based. Got a problem with that?" This was one of the first RPGs to land on the original PlayStation. And while it didn't have the budget of the giants, it had enough heart and personality to punch way above its weight. At its core, Wild Arms is a traditional turn-based RPG, but with some pretty slick twists. You've got a 3-character party, each with a defined role and a unique skill system that adds serious depth. One of the standouts is the arm system, which lets one of your characters use upgradable high-damage firearms, but with limited ammo. And managing that ammo becomes a strategic dance. Do you burn your big shots now, or save them for the boss that's probably lurking 5 screens ahead? On top of that, the game uses force points, a meter that builds up during combat, and unlocks powerful abilities as the fight progresses. And what about the soundtrack? That opening theme with whistling and acoustic guitars sets the tone for a journey that blends JRPG tropes with spaghetti western flair in a way that still feels unique today. Even though Sony's been weirdly silent about the series for years, you can still play a remastered version with trophy support on PS4 and PS5 thanks to PlayStation Plus Deluxe. It's worth a revisit, not just as a nostalgia trip, but as a reminder that RPGs can be weird, wild, and wonderful all at once. Quick break. If you're having fun so far, hitting that like button takes less than a second and helps way more than you'd expect. Also, drop a comment and tell me, what's the best PS1 RPG in your opinion? Comments are the best way to support the channel, since the algorithm loves videos with tons of engagement. And yes, I read and replied to every single one. Let's be honest, you can't talk about PS1 RPGs without mentioning Final Fantasy VII. It's not just a classic, it's the classic. This game didn't just bring JRPGs to the mainstream, it exploded the genre into pop culture with a meteor-sized impact. Back in 1997, most Western gamers had never touched an RPG. Then suddenly, there's this spiky-haired guy with a sword the size of a car door, cryptic villains, heart-shattering twists, and cinematic cutscenes that made everyone's jaw hit the floor. People didn't even know what kind of game it was. They just knew they had to play it, and once they did, boom. Entire generations got hooked on the genre. But let's talk gameplay a bit. Final Fantasy VII's materia system was ridiculously clever. Instead of locking characters into rigid roles, you had these magical orbs that you could slot into your gear to mix and match spells, buffs, summons, and even passive effects. And speaking of poetry, Nobuo Uematsu practically set his keyboard on fire, creating tracks like One-Winged Angel, Aerith's Theme, and Cosmo Canyon. It's one of those soundtracks you could hum in your sleep decades later and still feel like you're about to save the world. Of course, there's also Sephiroth, the One-Winged Menace, probably the most iconic villain in RPG history. His presence haunts the story in the best way. You're always chasing his shadow, trying to understand his madness, and when the final confrontation hits, man, it lands. It's not my personal favorite in the series, but we need to at least respect the empire it built, for the genre, for the platform, and for everything that came after. For me, it's the most important RPG in history. There's a certain kind of magic that only hits you once in a while. That feeling when a game boots up and you immediately know it's something special. That was Grandia for me. Crisp 2D sprites layered over gorgeous 3D backdrops, an opening cutscene that screamed adventure, and a battle system that honestly still puts modern turn-based games to shame. Sure, the voice acting might have been a little janky, but at the time it felt like a big-budget production. It was charming, it was alive, and it pulled you into a world you didn't want to leave. But what really sets Grandia apart is the combat system. It uses a time-based initiative bar where you can see who's about to act and when. And here's the twist. You can interrupt enemy actions if you hit them at just the right moment. It turns every battle into this mini tactical showdown where you're constantly juggling priorities. Attack now, or wait a few more seconds to cancel that boss's ultimate move. That decision-making loop is just chef's kiss. The story doesn't waste your time either, as the characters grow on you fast and the game constantly gives you new mechanics to play with. Whether you're unlocking new spells through skill usage or diving into dungeons that actually feel like part of the world, Grandia makes sure you're always doing something fresh. And today, there's zero excuse to miss it, as the remastered version of Grandia brings that classic charm with some much-needed polish. Visuals have been upscaled, UI cleaned up, and audio tweaked for modern systems, all while keeping the original vibe intact. You can grab it on PC and Nintendo Switch, or play the original PS1 version with trophy support on PS4 and PS5 through PlayStation Plus. It's the best way to experience one of the most beloved JRPGs of its era without digging out an old console. Parasite Eve is one of those rare games that feels like it slipped through a time portal from the future. Dropped at the tail end of the PS1 era, it mashed cinematic horror and RPG mechanics in a way nobody saw coming. And Square wasn't playing it safe here. They adapted a Japanese sci-fi novel, gave it real-time combat in a turn-based world and said, let's make this weird and stylish and kind of terrifying. And it worked. You play as Aya Brea, a rookie New York cop suddenly thrown into the most unhinged Christmas Eve of all time. It starts with an opera performance and ends with the entire audience bursting into flames. From there, it spirals really fast with twisted mutations, rogue mitochondria developing consciousness, and a biological nightmare unfolding in the streets of Manhattan. The plot goes completely off the rails, but in the best way possible. But what really sets Parasite Eve apart is its unique combat system. It blends the strategic pacing of turn-based RPGs with the tension of survival horror. Instead of being locked in place like most games of the era, you're free to move Aya around the battlefield in real time, dodging enemy attacks while you wait for your action bar to charge. Once the bar fills, you can unleash attacks, use items, or cast powerful parasite energy abilities, each with its own tactical value. Then there's the gear system, which is surprisingly deep. You can modify weapons and armor using tools that transfer stats and special abilities between equipment. This lets you build Aya's loadout however you want, stacking critical hit rates, elemental damage, status effects, or defensive boosts. And since some effects are rare or tied to specific gear, smart customization makes a huge difference. Plus, it's a short game with under 15 hours. For an RPG, that's practically a lunch break, but it never feels rushed. And since it never got a port or remaster, the only way to play Parasite Eve today is on the original PS1 or through emulation. And trust me, it's absolutely worth it. Alundra is one of those hidden gems that hits you with the charm of a 16-bit classic, then sucker punches you with existential dread. Released in late '97, this was PlayStation's answer to A Link to the Past, but darker, weirder, and way more willing to mess with your head, because this time, you're not just slashing monsters or solving puzzles. You're diving into people's dreams, and trust me, they get real messed up. You play as Alundra, a silent protagonist with the rare power to enter nightmares and fight off the twisted demons haunting villagers in their sleep. Sounds cool, right? Until those dreams start killing people for real, and suddenly your hero's journey becomes a front row seat to watching an entire town mentally unravel. The themes go hard, like loss, trauma, faith, corruption, all wrapped in colorful pixel art that somehow makes the darkness hit even harder. Gameplay-wise, Alundra is peak action RPG. Combat is fast, responsive, and dangerous. No leveling up here, just gear upgrades and your own survival instincts. But the real star of the show is the puzzles, and this game is absolutely loaded with them. Switch puzzles, block puzzles, timed obstacle puzzles, puzzles inside boss fights, and the best part is, they don't hold your hand. Then there's the platforming. Oh boy. Jumping in a 2D isometric space with no shadows and pixel-perfect precision is the kind of mechanic that makes you nostalgic and mildly homicidal. Late game sections crank the difficulty up so high, you'll swear the devs were personally offended by your existence. But hey, overcoming those segments makes the victory even sweeter. Once your thumbs stop cramping, Alundra isn't just about gameplay though. The writing is surprisingly heavy, and the dream sequences are some of the most creative and unsettling moments on the PS1. Add in a haunting, memorable soundtrack that shifts from whimsical to tragic without missing a beat, and you've got a game that sticks with you long after the credits roll. If you grew up loving Zelda, but wished it would throw in a little more death, philosophy, and emotional trauma, Alundra is your jam. Breath of Fire 3 is one of those rare games that aged like fine wine, a pixelated and dragon-infused wine, but still. It came out when Capcom was firing on all cylinders in the 90s, experimenting with stories that mixed fantasy, politics, and some surprisingly emotional moments. This wasn't just another RPG with turn-based combat and a spiky-haired protagonist, although yes, there is a spiky-haired protagonist. But the twist? He's a freaking dragon. You play as Ryu, a kid who literally wakes up from a crystal and finds out he can transform into different types of dragons. And that's where the coolest mechanic kicks in, the gene splicing system. As you progress, you collect dragon genes. Yes, dragon genes. And by combining up to 3 of them, you unlock dozens of unique dragon forms. Each gene has a distinct trait, like fire, ice, defense, fusion, or elemental boosts. And mixing them lets you create anything from agile elemental casters to massive tanks with devastating breath attacks. Some forms even fuse Ryu with party members, giving him hybrid abilities and stats. And unlocking a rare or overpowered form feels like discovering a secret weapon, and knowing when to transform adds a whole new layer of strategy to boss fights. But Breath of Fire 3 isn't just about flashy transformations. It's got one of the most charming casts of the era, all wrapped in some of the most gorgeous 2D art the PS1 ever saw. Seriously, this game is almost 30 years old and it still looks incredible. Towns feel alive, environments pop with color, and the animations during fights are smooth in a way that makes you forget you're playing on old hardware. There's also a full-on fishing mini-game that's not just a side distraction. It's actually a solid way to make money and get rare gear. Add to that a master-apprentice system, where you train under different NPCs to shape your character's stats and skills, and you've got an RPG that respects your time and rewards exploration. Chrono Cross hits different, not just because of the music, which, let's be honest, could emotionally destabilize a rock, but because it dared to be weird, bold, and unapologetically ambitious. While everyone was busy trying to be the next big fantasy epic, Chrono Cross threw 40 playable characters at your face, each with their own backgrounds, motivations, and elemental affinities. And yeah, some of them might join you depending on choices you didn't even realize were important. This branching party system gives the game insane replay value, especially for completionists who can't rest until they've recruited that one weird mushroom guy. Adds to that a storyline that folds in on itself like origami, and a battle system that basically told turn-based norms to take a hike, and you have one of the best RPGs of the PS1. It's the kind of game that makes you feel like you're playing an RPG and decoding a dream at the same time. Instead of basic magic points, Chrono Cross runs on an element grid system. Every character has a customizable field of magic slots, and casting spells alters the world's elemental balance mid-fight. Stack too many fire elements, and water attacks become stronger against you. It's not just strategy, it's a tug-of-war of metaphysical energy, and it forces you to think several turns ahead instead of just spamming your strongest moves. Oh, and the more you use your character's standard attacks, the more energy you build to use high-tier elements. Then there's the story. Parallel dimensions, identity crises, a talking pink dog that may or may not be a genius, and yes, it loosely connects to Chrono Trigger, But you absolutely don't need to play that first, though it'll make the emotional stabs hit harder. The writing is dense, sometimes a little messy, but packed with poetic moments and unforgettable scenes. And we can't forget about Yasunori Mitsuda's soundtrack because it is one of the best ever composed for a video game. Yeah, the remaster had a rocky start, but it's finally in good shape, running on modern consoles with polished visuals and that same emotional gut punch of an opening theme. If you missed it back in the day, now's the perfect time. Final Fantasy IX is what happens when a legendary developer gets nostalgic and decides to bring the magic back one crystal at a time. While most RPGs at the time were sprinting toward futuristic plots and brooding anti-heroes, Final Fantasy IX slammed the brakes and said, "Nah, let's do castles, dragons, and black mages and pointy hats again, but make it emotional." And it worked. This was Sakaguchi's love letter to the classic era of Final Fantasy, crafted alongside a separate team while Final Fantasy X was being made. Yeah, they were cooking two mainline titles at once. What makes this game so special isn't just the return to fantasy roots, but how refined every piece of it feels. The turn-based combat is snappy and easy to grasp, but still deep thanks to its ability system. Instead of a sphere grid or materia, each piece of equipment teaches you skills over time. So you're constantly weighing whether to swap to better stats or keep grinding that passive ability. It's one of the best learned by doing systems out there, making every weapon and armor choice matter in the long run. And then there's the cast. Zidane might look like your typical, cheerful anime thief, but the story takes him places that'll punch you in the gut. Characters like Vivi and Dagger don't just play roles in a fantasy world, they deal with identity, mortality, and political unrest in a way that feels surprisingly grounded. Plus, the active time event system lets you see what other characters are doing while you're off chasing the main story, giving the whole world a sense of life and movement that was ahead of its time. But let's talk about the soundtrack that's pure Uematsu fire. From the melancholic village themes to the boss battles, every track feels like emotional showdowns. And the best part? You can play the remastered version on basically everything with a screen. It runs smooth, has incredible mods, and still captures every bit of that early 2000s RPG soul. Alright, your turn. Which of these PS1 RPGs is your all-time favorite? Or did I miss one that absolutely deserved a spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really helps keep this going.